My son took out a $1,500,000 loan in my name to buy a house for his wife's family. At the housewarming, he panicked. How did you get here? I walked in with the bailiff. But the most terrifying part was in the last line of the document. Subscribe to the channel and share your stories in the comments. And now let's get started. I came home Tuesday evening with my back aching from 12 hours on my feet. The bakery ovens had been merciless that day, their heat clinging to me long after I untied my apron. My hair smelled faintly of yeast and sugar, my hands cracked from flour and scalding pans. I wanted only one thing: to sit at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, close my eyes, and forget that my body was 62 years old while my job demanded the bones and muscles of someone half that. Instead, I was greeted by the blinking red light of my answering machine. A voice message. I pressed play. Mom, Mark's voice burst through, too cheerful, too practiced. I've got a great idea. A house for Brooke's family, big, bright, all of us together. We just need your signature for a pre-approval. Banks give seniors better discounts. This could be amazing, Mom. The message ended with a click. I stood still in the hallway, grocery bag sliding from my wrist to the floor. His words rang in my head. Your signature, banks give seniors better discounts. Not your advice. Not your opinion. Not even your help. Just my signature, my age, my name turned into currency. Played it again. Then again. Each time it sounded less like my son, and more like a salesman rehearsing a pitch. I had heard that tone before, when he was 12 and begged for the expensive sneakers all the boys had, promising he'd take extra shifts mowing lawns. He hadn't. I paid. When he was 16 and wanted a car just to get to work, insisting it would teach him independence. It didn't. I took an extra night shift to cover the down payment, and within 6 months he'd crashed it. I bought the replacement too. And now, 35 years old, married with 3 children, he was still using the same tone, just wrapped in smoother words. That Sunday, I carried my unease with me to family dinner. We gathered at Mark and Brooke's house, which I had helped them furnish room by room over the years. The dining table? My money. The dishwasher humming in the corner? Mine too. Even the stroller folded neatly by the door had been my surprise gift. When Brooke announced her 3rd pregnancy, I had always told myself I was investing in their happiness, in stability for my grandchildren. Halfway through the meal, as dishes clattered and the children's voices filled the air, Brooke raised her glass. Her tone was playful, but her eyes were sharp. Helen, you'll finally be useful, she said, lips curling into a smirk. The room erupted in laughter. My son chuckled. Her parents nodded approvingly. Even my grandchildren giggled, not understanding the cruelty hidden in the joke but sensing the adults' delight. I forced a smile, my face stiff. The food on my plate turned tasteless. That single sentence lodged itself like a thorn in my chest. Finally useful. Had the hours I spent babysitting after bakery shifts not counted? The weekends I gave up so they could have couple time? The thousands of dollars I had quietly funneled into their bills when Brooke's boutique failed and Mark's hours were cut? Was I nothing until my signature could be turned into collateral? I looked at Mark, hoping for even the smallest flicker of defense, a word to soften the sting. But he only shrugged as if to say, don't be sensitive, Mom. Just a joke. The next Tuesday I stopped at the supermarket. A small indulgence for myself. A bottle of good olive oil, fresh strawberries, a cut of salmon. My shifts had been long, my body tired, and I thought I deserved it. The cashier slid my card, frowned, and handed it back. Declined. My ears burned. The people in line shuffled impatiently. I dug through my purse for crumpled bills, paid in cash, and left with my cheeks flaming. I told myself it must be a bank error, maybe a system glitch. But the shame clung to me like sweat. When I got home, a fat envelope waited on my doormat. Documents for review, the label read. I carried it to my kitchen table, the same table where I had planned birthday cakes for Mark as a boy, where I had balanced my checkbook late into the night while he slept. I slid it open and unfolded page after page. Neat cover sheets stamped pre-approval. Inside, mortgage terms, co-borrower sections, guarantor clauses. My name appeared over and over again. My stomach dropped. I called Mark, my voice trembling. What is this? It's just formality, Mom, he said smoothly. The bank just wants to know you've seen it. No one's locking you into anything. It's like a ticket reservation. You hold the spot, decide later. That's all. Mark, these pages, they're full of numbers. Commitments. It looks serious. Don't overthink it. Brooke's uncle works in real estate. He says it's routine. We just need you to acknowledge the packet. Everyone does it. His tone was firm, the kind that ended conversations. That Sunday, I brought the envelope with me, hoping to discuss it calmly. But when I started to ask questions, Brooke leaned over me, her perfume strong, her smile brittle. Don't be difficult, Helen, she said. It's for the family. Think of the grandkids, bigger rooms, a yard, better schools. You want that for them, don't you? The children were watching. My youngest grandson tugged at my sleeve. Grandma, will we have a swing set? I felt the laughter from the week before pressing on me again. Like fingers digging into a bruise. My throat tightened. I didn't want another round of ridicule. Not in front of the children. So I picked up the pen. The line read, only received for review. Not approval, not agreement. Just acknowledgement. Harmless, I told myself. Like signing for a package at the post office. My hand trembled as I wrote my name. Helen L. Carter. I didn't know then that same signature, lifted and pasted, would later appear on pages I had never seen. Pages that would tie my name, my condo, my life savings to debts that weren't mine. At that moment, all I knew was the silence of the children watching. The smirk of Brooke across the table, the relief in Mark's eyes, and the hollow echo inside me whispering, finally useful. A week later, Mark showed up at my door with a folder tucked under his arm, the way a salesman carries contracts when he's certain the client is ready to sign. He kissed my cheek quickly, distracted, already reaching for the kitchen table. Mom, they updated the packet, he said, laying the papers down like they were nothing more serious than a magazine subscription. You just need to initial in the margins. Otherwise, the builder might lose the lot. Time is tight. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and stared at the stack. The same cover sheets, stamped neat and official. But as I flipped them, I noticed differences. Small, easy-to-miss lines buried in fine print. Mark, I asked slowly, we're still talking about that $620,000 house near Austin, right? The one with the yard for the kids? Of course, he said smoothly, his smile practiced. Brooke appeared in the doorway, holding a mug of coffee, her face arranged in a picture of reassurance. Don't worry, Helen. It's all the same. Just details the bank needs. Sign and forget about it. Her tone was honeyed, but her eyes were steel. I felt as if the walls were pressing in, my own kitchen no longer mine. I picked up a page, squinting at the numbers. Interest rates, clauses, insurance requirements. They seemed to multiply, shifting like smoke the harder I tried to focus. Why so many pages? I murmured. Mark's laugh was quick, nervous. Banks love paperwork, Mom. You know that. They'd ask for your birth certificate if they thought it mattered. He handed me a pen. His hand brushed mine, warm, insistent. I should have refused. But the memory of Brooke's smirk at Sunday dinner burned in my mind. The sting of her words, finally useful, and the children's laughter echoed like a warning. I didn't want to be mocked again, made the fool in front of my grandchildren. So I wrote my initials in the margins. Tiny marks, black ink on white paper. Harmless, I told myself. Just margins. That night, unable to sleep, I tried calling the bank's hotline. I wanted to hear a human voice, someone who could explain what I had really signed. Instead, I was met with an automated loop: press 1 for balance, press 2 for mortgage services, press 3 for loans. Each option dragged me in circles until I hung up in frustration. The next morning, I walked into work at the bakery with my eyes heavy from sleeplessness. My manager, a woman half my age with a voice sharp as glass, called me into the back. Helen, you've been distracted. Mistakes on the register, orders delayed. We're cutting your hours. Maybe it'll help you focus. She said it loudly enough for the other girls to hear. My face flamed. I wanted to scream that I had carried this bakery for 20 years. That I had given up weekends, holidays, every Christmas morning for them. Instead, I nodded mutely while shame burned my throat. When I stepped outside, Mark's voice buzzed on my phone. Good news. The builder's excited. We're moving fast. My broker's on it. My broker. As if my life, my credit, my home were already his currency to spend. That evening, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and studied my reflection. Lines carved around my mouth from years of smiling through pain. Circles under my eyes from long shifts and longer nights. I whispered to myself, why am I the one who is ashamed? Why am I the one hiding? I thought of my late husband, David. He had died too soon, leaving me a modest condo and the life insurance that became my safety net. Every dollar of it I guarded for decades. I said no to vacations, to new clothes, to the quiet dreams I once had of seeing Paris. I saved it all so Mark could go to college, so he could marry without debt, so my grandchildren could have stability. And yet, here I was, cornered by my own blood. I remembered the day David and I signed the mortgage for our condo. We had sat at a bank desk, our fingers laced under the table, whispering prayers that we wouldn't lose the home before we could even begin. I had promised him silently that I would never let anyone gamble with what we had built. But now, with each careless signature, each innocent initial, I felt that promise slipping through my fingers. Mark texted again that night. Mom, we're so close. Just trust me. Trust. That word, once sacred, now tasted like ash. The next Sunday, I drove to their house for brunch. Brooke greeted me with a wide smile, her voice too bright. The living room was packed. Her cousins, her parents, her friends. Laughter spilled out of every corner. I hovered by the door, clutching the pie I had baked. Here, Helen, Brooke said, handing me a flimsy paper plate while she balanced a china one for herself. Don't take it personally, logistics. Her words were sugar-coated, but the sting was sharp. My seat at the table had already been taken by a stroller. As I balanced the paper plate on my lap, Brooke's cousin, a young man in a sleek suit, raised his voice above the chatter. You wouldn't believe how many idiot co-signers there are out there, he said, laughing. Old folks who don't even know what they're signing. It's practically theft in reverse, legalized charity. Everyone laughed. My cheeks burned. Mark leaned across the table, casual as ever. Mom, can you send me a scan of your driver's license later? They need it for the community gate pass. The words made my skin crawl. A gate pass? Or another excuse to copy my identity? That night my phone pinged. Family group chat. Photos of a sprawling luxury estate filled the screen, gleaming pool, marble floors, chandeliers. Captioned, our dream home. Almost ours. In the corner of one image, faint but unmistakable, was the logo of my bank. I typed a shaky message to Mark. That's my bank. Yeah. He *T back casually. They're convenient. As if it were the most natural thing in the world. Another ping. Your credit limit has been increased. Someone had logged into my profile. I sat frozen in the dark, phone glowing in my hand, realizing the truth. My signature wasn't just on review pages anymore. My life was being written over line by line in contracts I had never seen. Brunch was supposed to be a celebration. Brooke had phrased it like that when she invited me. A light, happy family gathering, Mom, nothing fancy. I baked 2 pies after my bakery shift, despite my aching back, because it felt like the only contribution left to me. Food, labor, effort, things I knew how to give. When I arrived, the driveway was crammed with SUVs and sedans I didn't recognize. Inside, the house was buzzing with voices, laughter echoing through every room. Brooke's parents were there, her cousins, friends, even her hairdresser. Strangers moved about as if they belonged, glasses in hand, filling the space with noise. I lingered in the entryway with my pies. Brooke swooped in, kissed my cheek with lips that barely brushed my skin, and placed a flimsy paper plate into my hands. Here you go, Helen, she said brightly. We're short on the good plates, don't take it personally. Logistics. The word stung more than the cheap plate itself. Logistics. As if my presence was a problem to be managed, an equation to be balanced without disturbing the celebration. I scanned the dining room. Every seat was full. My chair at the family table, had been claimed by a stroller. A stroller had more right to a place than I did. I sat on the edge of the couch with my paper plate balanced on my lap, trying to keep my hands steady as I picked at food. Laughter erupted at the table where Brooke's cousin, a smug young man in a tailored suit, was holding court. You wouldn't believe, he said, voice raised so everyone could hear, how many idiot co-signers are out there. Old school types. They don't even read what they're signing. Total amateurs. It's like legalized theft but in reverse. The banks let them give it all away. The room laughed. Forks clinked against china. Glasses clinked in toasts while my hands froze on my lap. I knew they were talking about me. Everyone knew. My cheeks burned as though someone had pressed them against the bakery oven door. Mark, sitting comfortably at the head of the table, glanced at me with casual ease. "Mom," he said loudly as if continuing the joke, "send me a scan of your driver's license later, yeah? They need it for the community gate pass." Gate pass. The word sounded like a ruse, another excuse to plunder what remained of my privacy. But no one around the table questioned him. They all nodded, approving, as though it was a perfectly natural thing for a son to strip his mother of her identity in front of a room full of strangers. I stared at my flimsy plate, suddenly nauseated. My pie sat untouched on the counter, ignored, forgotten. That night I sat alone in my condo, my only sanctuary, though even it felt less secure with each passing day. My phone buzzed with new messages. The family group chat was alive, exploding with photos. "Our dream home," the caption read. Photo after photo flooded in. Chandeliers glittering, marble floors reflecting light like water, a sweeping staircase that looked like something out of a movie. And in the corner of one image, faint but undeniable, I saw it, my bank's logo. My chest tightened. My hands shook. I typed, "That's my bank." Mark responded instantly. "Yeah, they're convenient." Convenient. The word sliced through me. My bank, my name, my savings, all reduced to a convenience. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. Then another ping lit up the darkness. "Your credit limit has been increased." It wasn't me. Someone had entered my profile, bypassed my passwords, and unlocked more of my future for their present. I dropped the phone as though it had burned me. The room tilted. For a moment I thought my heart had stopped. In my head, memories tumbled in disordered flashes. The night I worked until midnight so I could pay for Mark's college application fees, eating nothing but stale bread in the bakery kitchen. The Christmas I went without gifts for myself, funneling every spare dollar into the bicycle he swore would make him the happiest boy alive. The year David died, when I sold my wedding jewelry to cover tuition, whispering apologies to his memory as I handed over the pieces of our past for Mark's future. All of it, every sacrifice, every tear shed in silence, was supposed to build a foundation for my son. And now he was dismantling my life brick by brick in broad daylight, in front of laughing relatives who saw me as nothing but a gullible signature. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic, the creak of the condo walls. My condo, the one thing David and I had built together, the one place that still smelled faintly of his aftershave when I opened the wardrobe, the one safe harbor left to me. And now even that was at risk. The next morning I went to the bank in person. I needed answers. Proof. Something to hold in my hands that would either confirm my worst fears or tell me I was imagining things. The clerk at the counter, a cheerful young woman with blonde hair pulled into a ponytail, looked up my account. Her smile was wide, her tone practiced. "Congratulations, Mrs. Carter. Your application is approved." My pulse thudded in my ears. What application? She tapped at her screen, oblivious to the storm rising in me. Mortgage plus home equity line. The Home Plus package. Great rates. Her words blurred. I gripped the counter to steady myself. "I never applied for that," I whispered. She tilted her head sympathetically, though her eyes were glazed with the distance of someone following protocol. "Well, it lists you here as co-borrower and guarantor, Helen L. Carter. If you think there's an error, you can file a dispute through the call center." The call center. The same endless loop I had already tried. I stumbled out of the branch, clutching nothing but my purse. My legs felt hollow, like they might collapse beneath me. The sky above looked gray, even though the sun was shining. At that exact moment my phone buzzed again. Brooke had posted an Instagram story. I opened it with shaking hands. A slow video panned across the glittering Ridgewood estate. Laughter, champagne, balloons. Brooke's caption read, "Almost ours. Thanks to the most generous investor, 2 hearts." She had tagged me. My name sat beneath the video for everyone to see. Comments rolled in from her friends. "That's how retirement should look. Time to share. Lucky family. Go Helen." I wanted to scream, to tear the phone in half, to erase my name from that glowing screen. But the humiliation was public now, spread across the internet, preserved in digital amber. And then, as if to salt the wound, another message came. Mark's text. Housewarming Saturday. Bring pies. As though I were nothing more than a caterer to their fraud. As though my entire life hadn't just been signed away with forged ink. The branch smelled of fresh paint and disinfectant, the kind of sterile cheer banks love to project. I stepped inside with my hands trembling, clutching the slip of paper that had arrived in my mailbox. My name was printed neatly at the top. Helen L. Carter, co-borrower/guarantor. A young woman at the counter smiled like a flight attendant. Mrs. Carter, congratulations. Your application is approved. Her tone was chirpy, oblivious. My heart lurched. What application? She clicked through her screen. Mortgage plus home equity line, the Home Plus package. It's a great bundle. The documents show you as co-borrower and guarantor. Big congratulations to you and your family. I felt dizzy. That's not possible. I never applied for this. She shrugged, clearly unbothered. Well, it's here in the system. If you think it's an error, you can dispute it through the call center. The call center. I remembered the robotic voice looping endlessly, directing me in circles until my call dropped. It was a maze designed to exhaust people like me. I gripped the edge of the counter. Can you show me the file? Please. She frowned slightly but turned the screen toward me. My name glared back, typed neatly under the words guarantor. Irrevocable. The screen displayed my signature, familiar yet wrong. Tilted at an angle I never used, too smooth as if traced. My chest tightened. My voice was barely a whisper. That isn't me. The clerk's smile faltered for a second, but then she slipped back into her script. If you doubt it, you can file a dispute through the call center. They'll investigate. Is there anything else I can help you with today? I walked out of the bank with my heart pounding so hard I thought my ribs would split. The air outside was sharp, the sunlight almost cruel. My legs felt unsteady as I reached the street. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from Instagram. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Brooke's story filled my screen. A sweeping video of the Ridgewood estate. Balloons danced in the wind, the camera zooming over the pool, the glossy marble kitchen, the manicured lawn. Brooke's voice sang in the background. Almost ours. Thanks to the most generous investor. She had tagged me. My name was now branded as their benefactor, the gullible fool financing luxury. The comments poured in beneath her post. That's how retirement should look, time to share. Go Helen. What a generous queen. Your family is so lucky to have you. My throat closed. I couldn't breathe. Each word was a knife, turning generosity into mockery. They didn't know I hadn't agreed to any of it. They didn't know my signature was stolen, my identity hijacked. To the world I looked complicit, proud even. I wanted to scream into the void. I didn't agree to this. I'm being used. This isn't generosity. It's theft. But social media has no ears for truth. It only loves spectacle. And now my humiliation was immortalized in digital ink. As if that weren't enough, my phone buzzed again. A text from Mark. Housewarming Saturday. Bring pies. 4 words. Cold. Commanding. Dismissive. Not please, not we'd love to see you. Not even thank you for everything you've done. Just a demand, as though I were the hired help assigned to provide dessert. I sat down hard on the bus stop bench outside the bank. My hands were numb. My breath came in shallow bursts. Images swirled in my mind. Mark as a boy, falling asleep against my shoulder on the bus when I carried him home from school after a late bakery shift. His graduation day when I stood in the crowd, heart bursting with pride, knowing I had worked double shifts to cover the tuition bills. His wedding where I bought the suit, the flowers, the down payment for the honeymoon, telling myself it was my gift to his future. Every sacrifice, every dollar, every sleepless night, all of it had led to this moment, where my own son reduced me to nothing more than a signature and a pie baker for his parties. The next day at work I felt like a ghost. My coworkers chatted about their weekends, about sales, about their children's recitals. I moved like a machine, shaping dough, setting trays in the oven, wiping flour from my arms. But inside I was crumbling. By afternoon my manager called me aside. Helen, you've been distracted. Orders are delayed. Customers notice. We'll cut your hours. It might help you focus. She said it in front of the others. My cheeks burned. I nodded silent, swallowing humiliation the way I had swallowed Brooke's smirks, Mark's casual demands, the laughter of strangers at brunch. That evening I walked home slowly, dragging my feet. I reached my condo and leaned against the door before unlocking it. The walls welcomed me with their silence. But even there I couldn't shake the weight pressing against my chest. I looked around my living room, at the framed photo of David on the shelf. His smile, frozen in time, felt like both comfort and accusation. I had promised him I would guard what we built. I had promised I would protect it for Mark, for our family. Now Mark was the one dismantling it. I pressed my hand against the cool glass of the photo frame. David, I whispered, what have we raised? How did it come to this? The condo, my last fortress, felt suddenly fragile. Papers could strip it away. A forged signature could erase it. I could be evicted from the home where I had grieved, healed, and survived. And yet Mark's text still rang in my head, bring pies. As though nothing mattered except the show, the performance, the illusion of family unity, he wanted to project at his fraudulent housewarming. The first alarm had sounded. I could no longer pretend it was just a misunderstanding, just a mistake. It was deliberate, calculated, and I was the pawn in their game. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the stack of mail. A courier packet lay among the envelopes, pages shuffled strangely. My hand shook as I reached for it, knowing that whatever was inside would confirm the truth I already dreaded. My name, my life had been *p***nized. And the war had only just ***n. The courier packet sat heavy on my kitchen table, its corners smudged from my nervous hands. I had tried to sleep, but each time I closed my eyes I saw Brooke's glittering Instagram video, the comments praising my generosity, Mark's casual text demanding pies for the housewarming. I knew the packet would confirm what my gut had already screamed, that my life had been stolen one page at a time. I unfolded the papers carefully, laying them out across the table. Some were identical to the ones Mark had shown me earlier. Same neat cover sheets, same pre-approval stamps. But others were different. Clauses appeared where none had been before. The text was dense, printed in a smaller font, as if the words were trying to hide in plain sight. I read the phrases aloud, my voice trembling. Personal irrevocable guarantee, confession of judgment. Foreclosure rights in case of default. The air in the condo felt thick, suffocating. I shoved the pages back into the envelope and pressed my forehead against the cool table surface. For a moment I wished David were alive. Wished there was someone else to carry this burden. But there was no one. Just me, 62 years old, exhausted, humiliated, and now cornered. The next morning, I carried the packet to a small law office recommended by a coworker. I had hesitated, lawyers meant money, and money was already scarce. But I knew I was out of my depth. The brass plaque on the door read Dan Moore, attorney at law. Inside, the office smelled faintly of coffee and dust. A young man in a wrinkled shirt looked up from behind his desk. He couldn't have been more than 30. Mrs. Carter? He asked, standing quickly. His handshake was firm but not overbearing. Please have a seat. What brings you in today? I placed the packet on his desk with shaking hands. I think something's wrong. My son asked me to sign some pages, just margins, just acknowledgments. But this looks different. He nodded gently, sliding the papers toward himself. Let's take a look. For several minutes he flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing deeper with each turn. He pulled two sheets side by side, tapping his pen against them. Section G here, see this? It doesn't match the rest. The formatting is off. Different printer, different timestamp. I leaned closer. He was right. The header was slightly darker, the ink heavier. He continued, voice growing firmer. This clause is particularly troubling. Personal irrevocable guarantee and confession of judgment. That means if the borrower defaults, you've already agreed without trial to let the bank seize your assets. And here, he pointed to a line buried near the bottom. This secures the debt with your condo. My stomach dropped. My condo? Yes. This isn't for a $620,000 property near Austin. The figure here is $1. $5 million. Ridgewood Estate. And it includes a revolving credit line also in your name. The room spun. My breath came shallow. I gripped the arms of the chair to steady myself. Dan's voice softened. Mrs. Carter, someone forged your signature. These aren't the same pages you thought you signed. This is textbook page substitution. Classic fraud. The words forged your signature cut through me like a knife. I wanted to vomit. My own son's face flashed before me. The same boy who once clutched my hand in a crowded supermarket. The boy I worked double shifts for so he'd never feel poor. That boy had grown into a man capable of pasting my name onto chains meant to drag me under. Can we stop it? My voice cracked. Dan nodded, though his jaw was tight. If we move fast, we'll need to file a fraud report, notify the bank, and preserve any surveillance footage from the broker's office. And we'll petition for an injunction to block any lien against your condo. It's urgent. Timing matters. I nodded, numb. Dan leaned back, studying me. How did your son present these papers to you? I explained. How he had smiled, how Brooke had reassured me. How I had been cornered at the dinner table with the grandchildren watching. How I had signed just to silence the ridicule. Dan's eyes hardened. That's not consent. That's coercion. And when paired with page substitution, it's fraud. The courts take this seriously, especially with elder financial abuse. The phrase elder financial abuse felt strange in my ears. Like a diagnosis I hadn't wanted but secretly suspected. He slid the papers into a neat stack. I'll take copies. Keep the originals safe. Tonight, go home and lock your doors. Don't sign anything else. Don't answer financial questions from anyone. I'll file immediately. I nodded again, still stunned. As I left the office, the city seemed sharper, louder. Every passing car felt like a threat. Every shadow suspicious. I clutched my purse close, as though my identity could slip out if I wasn't careful. At home, I sat at my table staring at the photo of David again. They forged me, I whispered. They used my name to erase me. The condo was silent, but the words lingered in the air like smoke. That night I dreamed of signatures multiplying, black ink crawling across walls, windows, even my skin. Each line spelled Helen L. Carter, binding me tighter until I woke gasping for air. When morning came, I called Dan. My voice shook. What happens if we're too late? He didn't sugarcoat it. If the lien is recorded, foreclosure proceedings can move quickly. But I'm working on an emergency injunction. We'll fight. Fight. The word echoed in me. I hadn't fought in years. I had endured, compromised, surrendered, but not fought. Now I had no choice. The morning after Dan uncovered the forged clauses, I sat at his office again with my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles ached. He spoke quickly, moving with the urgency of someone who knew time could snap shut like a trap. Mrs. Carter, here's what we're doing. First, I filed a formal fraud report with the bank. That locks the account in dispute. Second, I've frozen your personal credit line. No one can increase it without your in-person confirmation. Third, I've submitted a preservation request for all surveillance footage from the broker's office. If anyone handled those documents illegally, we'll have evidence. I blinked at him, my head buzzing. The words fraud report and frozen credit felt like shackles and shields at once. And, Dan continued, I've drafted a petition for an injunction blocking any lien against your condo. If the court grants it, the builder and the bank cannot touch your property while this case is active. My condo, I whispered, the two words trembling out of me. That home had been my last fortress, and hearing him say it out loud reminded me how close I had come to losing it. Dan looked me straight in the eyes. We'll need you under oath. You'll testify that you signed only acknowledgement pages and never saw the substituted sections. The judge will want clarity. I nodded. My throat was dry. 2 days later, we were in a wood-paneled courtroom, the ceiling high and cold, the air heavy with the weight of judgment. I sat at the plaintiff's table, palms sweating, while Dan shuffled papers beside me. Across the aisle, a lawyer in a glossy suit sat stiffly with a bank representative. The broker, Lucas, was absent. The judge, a woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a bun, entered briskly. She glanced at the docket, then at me. Mrs. Carter, I understand you allege fraud in a mortgage application? My voice quivered as I answered. Yes, Your Honor. My signature was placed on pages I never saw. Dan rose. Your Honor, this is a classic case of page substitution. My client was shown innocuous documents, told to initial margins for formality. Then later those signatures were lifted and applied to binding pages containing a $1.5 million liability and an irrevocable guarantee secured by her home. This is elder financial exploitation in its purest form. The bank's lawyer objected immediately. Speculative. The documents bear her signature, plain as day. Dan slit 2 sheets across the table. Here, Your Honor. Compare Section G from Exhibit A and Exhibit B. Different font size. Different print run. And the timestamp metadata shows they were generated at different times. Yet both bear the identical signature. The judge leaned closer, adjusting her glasses. She frowned. Interesting. Continue. Dan gestured to me. Mrs. Carter, please tell the court how your son presented these papers. My throat tightened. I forced the words out. He said it was formality, that the builder would lose the lot if I didn't initial the margins. Brooke, his wife, told me not to be difficult. The grandchildren were watching. I signed. I thought it was nothing. The judge's gaze softened briefly, but her tone remained firm. You're saying you never saw the final loan terms? Never, I whispered. If I had, I would never risk my home. Dan leaned in. Your Honor, we ask for an immediate injunction to block any lien or foreclosure action involving my client's condo. Without it, she faces irreparable harm. The judge tapped her pen against the bench, thoughtful. Finally, she nodded. I'll schedule a full hearing for Monday. In the meantime, I'm granting a temporary injunction. No party may record a lien or foreclosure against Mrs. Carter's property until this case is heard. Relief hit me so hard I nearly collapsed. The condo, my fragile fortress, was safe for now. Outside the courtroom, Dan placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. That's our first shield. Temporary but crucial. Now we prepare for Monday. The weekend loomed like a storm cloud. But Saturday carried another weight. The housewarming Brooke had announced so gleefully. Dan asked me carefully, will you go? I thought of Brooke's smirks, Mark's texts, the humiliation at brunch, the forged signature staring at me from the bank's screen. My lips curled into a grim line. Yes, I said. But not alone. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the injunction papers spread before me. My hands traced the judge's words. Temporary injunction granted. For the first time in weeks, I felt something unfamiliar pressing against the grief, the shame, the fear. It was resolve. I brewed tea, the steam rising in soft spirals, and whispered into the silence of my condo. David, I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm fighting. The clock ticked past midnight. Outside, the city lights flickered. My phone buzzed with another message from Mark. See you tomorrow, Mom. Don't forget the pies. I stared at the screen, then slid it face down on the table. The message no longer cut into me like a blade. It sounded smaller now, desperate even. Because tomorrow, I would not arrive as their silent, useful mother. I would arrive with a shield. Saturday came dressed in balloons and lies. The Ridgewood estate was impossible to miss. I drove slowly through the manicured gates, my stomach knotted, my hands locked tight around the steering wheel. The mansion rose above the drive like something from a glossy magazine. Arched windows, sprawling balconies, a fountain spraying arcs of water that sparkled in the afternoon sun. Balloons bobbed near the entrance, their silver letters spelling welcome home. I wasn't welcome. Not really. I was only expected to arrive carrying pies, smiling as though my life hadn't been forged into collateral. But I hadn't come alone. In the passenger seat sat Court Officer Rick Hayes, a man with the bulk and stillness of someone who had seen hundreds of families unravel in courtrooms. He held a thick folder of documents in his lap. We'll serve them formally, he said in a calm, steady voice. Once it's read out, the injunction holds. No one can say they weren't warned. I nodded. My throat was dry, but there was no turning back. As we pulled up, music pulsed from rented speakers. A DJ spun records on the patio. Children squealed near the pool. Waiters in black vests carried trays of champagne flutes. Brooke's parents mingled with friends, their voices bright, their smiles wide. Mark stood at the center of it all, glass raised high, his face lit with pride. To my wife's family, he shouted. Cheers erupted. Brooke clinked glasses with her cousin, her eyes sparkling as though she had already conquered the world. And then our car rolled to a stop at the curb. I stepped out first. Conversations faltered. A few guests glanced curiously, some whispering behind their hands. My plain dress, my weary face, my steady gait. It all clashed against the glitter of Ridgewood. Then Rick emerged, tall, official, carrying the documents like a wee *P***N. His presence shifted the air. The music seemed to lower itself instinctively, the DJ glancing nervously toward the house. Mark's face drained of color. He lowered his glass, his hand trembling. "Mom, how did you get here?" I met his gaze, voice calm but sharp. "By the address listed on my debt." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rick opened the folder, his deep voice carrying across the patio. "Court order, temporary injunction, and lien dispute notice concerning the property known as Ridgewood Estate. All parties present are hereby informed." Brooke's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the stone. Guests pulled out their phones, recording. Their smiles shifted to smirks, then to shock as Rick's words echoed. "Fraud investigation pending. All liens against Mrs. Helen L. Carter's condominium are frozen until hearing." Mark lunged forward, face twisted. "Stop! You can't do this here." But his protest was swallowed by murmurs, by the click of cameras, by the heavy authority of legal language cutting through the air. Rick didn't flinch. He read the documents line by line, each word a blade. Forgery suspected. Page substitution under review. Elder financial exploitation under Statute 32B. The words hung in the air, impossible to laugh off. I turned slowly, taking in the faces around me. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some edging toward the exit, others whispering furiously. Brooke's cousin, the junior lawyer who had mocked idiot co-signers, paled visibly. The realtor near the buffet fumbled with her badge, trying to make herself invisible. "Mom," Mark hissed, his voice cracking. "You're ruining everything." I looked at him, at the man I had raised, the man who had once cried in my arms after his first heartbreak, the man I had carried through every storm. "Am I ruining everything?" I asked softly. "Or is it this?" I tapped the final page Rick held aloft. "That ruins everything?" The crowd leaned closer, hungry for spectacle. Brooke's parents shifted uneasily. The balloons bobbed in the breeze, mocking in their cheer. Rick cleared his throat, pointing to the last clause. "Guarantor irrevocably consents to foreclosure and sale of her current residence in case of any borrower default, waiving right to prior notice." Gasps. Murmurs. Someone muttered. "They put her condo on the line?" Brooke's face contorted, fury breaking through her mask. "That's standard practice," she snapped. Dan, who had slipped in quietly during the reading, stepped forward with a folder of his own. "Standard doesn't mean legal," he countered, his voice crisp. The DJ cut the music entirely. Phones remained raised, capturing every word. Guests began drifting toward the driveway, murmuring as they left. "Unbelievable," I heard one whisper. "He used his mother's name for $1. 5 million? Another shook her head, whispering, "Disgusting." Brooke's father avoided my eyes, muttering to his wife, "We didn't know about her condo." But Brooke snapped, her voice sharp as broken glass. "My parents' house is priority." I felt my spine straighten, my voice steady. "And my life is too." Mark's jaw clenched. He looked around, desperate, as though the walls of his golden dream house were already crumbling. "Stop filming!" He shouted at the guests, but no one listened. The spectacle was too rich, too damning. Rick handed the last page to the realtor, who stood stiffly, face drained. "You've been served," he said. "Any further attempt to register this property under these terms is suspended pending court review." The realtor nodded weakly, her badge slipping into her pocket as if to hide her complicity. The housewarming was no longer a celebration. It was an exposure. A reckoning. Mark turned on me then, voice trembling with rage. "Why couldn't you just trust me? Why did you have to come here and humiliate us?" I held his gaze. "Trust." My voice was calm, deadly. "You forged me. You laughed at me. You risked the only home I have. Trust died the moment you decided my life was disposable." The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel. Behind me the balloons bobbed uselessly, their silver letters twisted by the breeze. "Welcome Ho, half deflated, half lies." The party was over. The music had died. The laughter had curdled into whispers. The Ridgewood estate, so carefully staged with its balloons and champagne, now felt like a courtroom with no escape. The broker, Lucas, appeared at the edge of the patio, his suit slightly wrinkled, his face pale under the weight of too many eyes. He cleared his throat, fumbling with his tie. This is a misunderstanding," he stammered. "There must be a clerical mix-up. These things happen in complex transactions." His words rang hollow. The realtor tried to herd guests toward the buffet table, her voice falsely bright. "Everyone, let's enjoy the food. No need to get caught up in technicalities." But no one moved. Phones remained raised, recording. Conversations hummed in hushed tones. Forgery. Elder abuse? Her condo. The whispers spread like cracks in glass. Brooke's cousin, the junior lawyer who had mocked idiot co-signers just a week earlier, stepped forward with the arrogance of someone who thought his degree could shield him from truth. "She signed everything herself," he declared loudly, gesturing toward me. "Nobody forced her. These documents are binding, Your Honor or no." The crowd muttered. Some looked at me with pity, others with disbelief. I stood tall, my hands steady at my sides, my gaze fixed on him. Dan, calm as ice, opened his folder. "Shall we test that claim?" He slid a flash drive into the giant TV the realtor had set up to showcase glossy photos of our dream home. The slideshow of marble countertops and infinity pools flickered, then vanished, replaced by stark black and white scans. The room stilled. "Exhibit A," Dan said. The screen displayed one version of my signature, crisp and slanted. "This is Mrs. Carter's signature on an acknowledgement page." He clicked. "Exhibit B." The same signature appeared again, identical, down to the loop of the H and the tilt of the L. But this time it sat atop a confession of judgment, time-stamped an hour later. The crowd gasped. Someone whispered, "Copy-paste." Dan's voice was firm, cutting through the murmurs. "This is not natural handwriting duplication. This is an image of her signature, lifted electronically and pasted onto new documents." And here, he tapped the screen, where metadata glowed in the corner. Timestamp mismatch. Exhibit A generated at 2:14 p.m. Exhibit B, supposedly signed, logged at 2:17 p.m. But surveillance and geolocation data place Mrs. Carter at a pharmacy line across town at that exact moment. The murmurs swelled. A guest muttered, "So she couldn't have signed it." Another said, "Unbelievable. Using your own mother?" Mark's face darkened. He lunged toward the TV, yanking the flash drive. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice cracking. "This is manipulation. She doesn't understand what she signed. She's confused, she's old." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My knees trembled, but my voice was steady. "I may be old, Mark, but I am not confused." Rick, the court officer, stepped forward, his presence a wall of authority. "Let the evidence stand. The order is valid." Lucas, the broker, tried again, his words desperate. "Please, this isn't what it looks like. These are standard procedures." Everyone initialed the same packet. Dan cut him off. "Standard procedures don't involve cloning signatures and falsifying timestamps. You'll answer to the regulators, Mr. Lucas." The realtor, still clutching her useless badge, whispered to no one in particular. "I didn't know. I thought it was all legitimate." Her words faded under the weight of the crowd's judgment. Brooke's cousin raised his voice, but it cracked. Even if there were irregularities, Mrs. Carter benefited. Her family was securing a future. Securing a future? I said, my voice cold as stone. By gambling with my home? By stealing my name? By turning me into collateral while laughing at me over paper plates? The silence that followed was absolute. Even the children, restless moments ago, had gone still. Guests began edging toward the driveway. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others whispered furiously to one another. The words fraud and elder abuse clinging to the air. A neighbor from Brooke's side muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "We'll be telling the community board about this." Brooke's face, once painted with triumph, was twisted with fury. She hissed at me, her voice sharp. "Why couldn't you just play along? Why did you have to drag this circus here?" I looked at her evenly. "Because my home is not your stage. And my life is not your prop." Mark's hand shook as he pointed at me, his voice trembling with rage. You've ruined everything. Everything we built. What you built. I cut in. Or what you stole. The projector screen still glowed with the evidence. The cut-and-paste signature. The damning timestamps. The proof that their empire was nothing more than paper and lies. Rick folded the documents neatly, his voice final. This matter is under court jurisdiction now. Further attempts to proceed will be treated as contempt. The DJ began packing his equipment in silence. The caterers exchanged uneasy glances. The balloons bobbed pathetically, their silver letters now spelling a fractured welcome ho. Like the welcome itself had given up. Guests streamed out, their whispers trailing behind them. He used his mother's name. She caught them red-handed. Disgusting. The Ridgewood estate, moments ago buzzing with celebration, now stood hollow, echoing with shame. I turned to leave, my steps steady, though my chest still ached. Behind me, Mark shouted one last time, his voice raw. You'll regret this, Mom. But as I walked toward the waiting car with Rick and Dan at my side, I realized something. For the first time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a witness. And the house of lies they had built was collapsing brick by brick, truth by truth. The crowd hadn't fully scattered. A handful of guests lingered on the patio, whispering behind their phones, unwilling to miss the unraveling. The projector screen still glowed, frozen on the duplicated signature like a scar carved into light. Rick, steady as stone, flipped to the final page in his stack of documents. There's one more clause that requires attention. Mark groaned. This is ridiculous. Haven't you humiliated us enough? Brooke tugged at his sleeve, her face blotched red, mascara smudging under her eyes. Don't say anything, she hissed, though her whisper carried in the tense silence. Rick adjusted his glasses and read aloud, his voice booming across the hollowed celebration. Guarantor irrevocably consents to foreclosure and sale of her current residence in case of any borrower default, waiving right to prior notice. Gasps rippled like a wave. A woman near the buffet dropped her glass. It shattered against the stone floor. Someone muttered. Her condo. They put her condo on the line? Another whispered. Without telling her? That's theft. The words dug into me like claws. I had suspected. Dan had warned me. But hearing them read aloud in that sterile legal phrasing felt like watching my life carved into pieces. My home, the last sanctuary of David's memory. The walls that held decades of struggle and survival. It had been signed away with a falsified flourish. Dan stepped forward, his voice sharp. And there, ladies and gentlemen, is the truth of this deal. The very first missed payment and Mrs. Carter's condo would have been seized. Not a warning. Not a hearing. Automatic foreclosure. Mark's cousin, still trying to salvage the scene, barked out. That's standard practice. Every guarantor clause has language like that. Dan didn't flinch. Standard doesn't make it legal. Standard doesn't make it moral. And standard doesn't excuse forgery. A low hum of agreement ran through the remaining guests. Heads shook, eyes narrowed, pitying glances slid my way. Not the pity of weakness but of recognition. They understood now. Brooke, trembling, crossed her arms. Her voice was sharp, brittle. Everyone's being dramatic. This is how real estate works. You secure property, you leverage assets. That's how families build legacies. I turned slowly to face her. Families don't build legacies by stealing from their mothers. Families don't build legacies by laughing at the woman who paid their bills, who worked herself raw so they could eat, who traded her life for their comfort. Families don't build legacies out of lies. Brooke's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted to the remaining guests, but no one came to her defense. Even her parents stood apart, faces grim, silent. Mark's face twisted, desperation breaking through his mask. Mom, you're making a scene. Stop this. Please. Think of the kids. The kids. Always the shield, the excuse. I felt my lips curl into something closer to a snarl than a smile. Don't you dare use them to justify this. Don't you dare drag them into your fraud. They deserve better than parents who gamble with lies. The weight of the truth settled heavily. The guests knew. The court officer knew. Even the walls of Ridgewood seemed to groan with the burden of the lie. Rick folded the papers neatly and handed them to Mark. You've been served. Any attempt to proceed with this property under these terms will be frozen until further notice. Violating this injunction will result in contempt charges. Mark took the documents with shaking hands. His eyes flicked to mine, filled not with remorse but with venom. Why couldn't you just let us live? Why did you have to drag us down? I met his gaze evenly. Because you tied my home to your greed. Because you left me no choice. Dan pulled another folder from his briefcase and laid it on the patio table. Metadata logs. Courier records. Surveillance requests filed. We'll have the full picture soon enough. But what we've seen tonight is enough to sink this scheme. Guests began leaving in earnest now, their murmurs trailing behind them. She caught him red-handed. That poor woman. Imagine doing that to your own mother. The Ridgewood estate was hollowing, its grandeur shrinking with every step of retreating shoes. The balloons bobbed weakly in the fading light, their silver sheen tarnished by shame. Brooke's parents approached her quietly. Her mother touched her arm. You didn't tell us about Helen's condo, she said, her voice low but firm. Her father added, This isn't right, Brooke. Not like this. Brooke wrenched away, eyes blazing. Don't take her side. This was for us, for all of us. My parents' house was priority. The admission hung heavy in the air. Even her staunchest defenders winced. I stepped closer, my voice low but cutting. And my life? My home? Was that just collateral damage to you? Her silence was answer enough. Mark flung the folder onto the table, papers scattering. His voice cracked as he shouted, This is all your fault. If you just signed without questioning, none of this would have happened. Rick's voice sliced through his outburst. Enough. This matter is under judicial review. Any further harassment of your mother will be noted in the case file. The words landed with finality, slamming the coffin on what had once been my son's bright, impossible dream of Ridgewood. I turned to leave, the path to the car lined with the remnants of their celebration. Empty glasses, half-eaten hors d'oeuvres, abandoned party favors. Each step felt heavy and light all at once. Heavy with grief, light with the first breath of freedom. Behind me, Mark's voice carried one last time, broken, furious. You'll regret this, Mom. You'll end up with nothing. I paused at the edge of the driveway, then looked back just once. Nothing is better than lies. And with that, I walked into the night, the last line burned into my mind. The clause meant to erase me, now transformed into proof of their betrayal. The Ridgewood estate no longer hummed with music or laughter. The champagne flutes sat abandoned, condensation dripping into sticky rings on the patio tables. The last balloons sagged pitifully in the evening air, their silver letters warped into nonsense. But the drama wasn't finished. Not yet. Mark paced in front of the projector screen, the documents in Rick's hands like daggers pointed directly at him. His face flushed crimson, sweat shining on his forehead. The crowd had thinned, but enough people remained. Neighbors, cousins, colleagues of Brooke's father. That humiliation still pressed on him like a spotlight. Enough of this circus, he shouted suddenly, striding toward the projector. His hand darted out, yanking the flash drive free. The screen went black, plunging the patio into a tense hush. Gasps rose from the guests. Someone muttered, He's trying to hide it. Another whispered, Too late. Everyone saw. Dan didn't flinch. Calmly, almost with a hint of grim satisfaction, he reached into his briefcase. We anticipated this. He spread out printouts across the table, pages thick with highlighted sections, courier logs, PDF metadata comparisons. Here are the originals. 2 separate print runs. 2 distinct timestamps. 1 signature duplicated. 1 placed when Mrs. Carter was physically documented across town. You can pull every receipt, every surveillance clip. It all lines up. Rick leaned in, reading aloud from 1 page. Courier records show 2 deliveries. The first to Mrs. Carter's condo, harmless acknowledgments. The second, to this property, with substituted sections, already bearing her forged signature. The crowd buzzed louder. Even those halfway to the driveway turned back, curiosity dragging them into the spectacle. Mark slammed his fist onto the table. Papers fluttered, but Dan's evidence was weighted, clipped, organized. It did not scatter. You're destroying my family, Mark roared, his voice cracking. This was supposed to be our chance. Our dream. Your dream, I said softly, my voice carrying farther than I expected. Funded by my nightmare. Brooke's eyes flashed, her voice shrill. Stop acting like a victim, Helen. You benefited too. A bigger home. More space for the grandkids to visit. No, I cut in sharply. You never wanted me there. You laughed at me. You shoved a paper plate in my hand while you dined on china. This house was never mine. It was yours, bought with my name, built on my ruin. Her mouth snapped shut. Rick unfolded the last page in his folder, his tone final. This freeze order has been served not only to the bank, but also to the builder and the title company. No registration can proceed. No withdrawals. This property is locked until the investigation concludes. Brooke's parents exchanged horrified glances. Her father muttered, "We didn't sign up for fraud, Brooke. This isn't salvageable." Her mother added in a trembling voice, "You told us Helen agreed willingly." But Brooke's glare silenced them. "Don't you dare turn on us now. This is about legacy." Legacy. The word tasted like rot. One of the guests, a neighbor from Ridgewood who had been eyeing the estate enviously all evening, shook his head. Legacy? All I see is theft. You took your own mother's home and called it family planning. The murmurs grew sharper, harsher. Brooke's cousin lawyer paled, muttering something about professional distance, before retreating toward the exit. The realtor slipped her badge into her purse and disappeared without a word. For once, Mark seemed cornered enough to let the mask slip. He turned on me, his voice low, almost pleading now. "Mom, we just wanted to give the kids more. A better life." I thought. "You thought wrong," I snapped, steel rising in my voice. "A better life doesn't come from forgery. It doesn't come from stealing your mother's home. Comes from work, from sacrifice, from honesty, the very things I gave you all my life." His shoulders sagged. For a fleeting second I thought I saw the boy he used to be. The boy who once hugged me tightly after nightmares, who whispered, "Don't ever leave me, Mom." But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who saw me as a wallet with a pulse. Dan spread the documents one last time, his voice ringing clear. "The evidence is undeniable. This was never about family. This was fraud. And the law will see it through." The finality in his tone sealed it. The Ridgewood estate no longer felt like a dream. It was a crime scene dressed in balloons. Brooke's parents slipped away quietly. The last of the neighbors followed. Within minutes, only Mark, Brooke, Dan, Rick, and I remained on the patio surrounded by the debris of their collapsed celebration. Mark's voice broke the silence, hoarse with rage. "You've turned everyone against us. You've destroyed us." I looked around at the abandoned glasses, the broken balloon letters, the scattered papers. Then back at him. "No, Mark. You destroyed yourself the moment you decided my life was expendable." Rick gathered the folders. Dan closed his briefcase. I turned toward the driveway. My steps were slow but steady, each one pulling me farther from the wreckage of Ridgewood and closer to something I hadn't felt in years: control. Behind me, Brooke's scream pierced the night. "We'll fight you in court. You'll see you can't win." But her voice cracked with desperation, not certainty. Because deep down she already knew. The turning point had come. And it hadn't bent in their favor. Monday came with the weight of judgment. The courtroom was colder than I remembered. The hum of the fluorescent lights drilling into my skull as I sat at the plaintiff's table once again. Dan shuffled his papers with the steady precision of a man who knew the truth was on his side. Rick Hayes, the court officer, sat nearby, ready to confirm his service of the freeze order. Across the aisle, Mark looked smaller than he had at Ridgewood. His suit was wrinkled, his tie crooked, his face drawn with sleeplessness. Brooke sat rigid beside him, lips pressed tight, her eyes darting nervously to the benches where a handful of journalists whispered into notepads. The judge entered briskly, robes trailing. Case 1482 C. Carter v. Ridgewood Lending and Associated Parties. Motion for injunction. Dan rose. "Your Honor, as demonstrated Saturday, my client's signature was forged onto substituted documents, elevating her liability from a $620,000 property to a $1.5 million estate. Metadata, courier logs, and witness testimony confirm the fraud. We request the injunction be upheld in full." The bank's lawyer tried to object, but his words fell flat against the tide of evidence. The judge leaned forward, adjusting her glasses as she scanned the documents. She paused at the duplicated signatures, her brow furrowing. "This is highly irregular," she said. "Irrefutable, in fact. The injunction is upheld. No liens may be recorded against Mrs. Carter's property. Furthermore, the broker, Lucas Bennett, is hereby suspended pending audit by the State Licensing Board." A low murmur swept through the room. Brooks' shoulders tensed. Mark lowered his gaze, his jaw tight. But the judge wasn't finished. Additionally, given the clear evidence of fraudulent conduct and potential elder financial exploitation, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for review. Criminal charges may follow. The words landed like thunder. I exhaled slowly, the breath rattling out of me as if I'd been holding it for weeks. Outside the courthouse, journalists pressed close, microphones flashing like bayonets. "Mrs. Carter, did your son forge your signature? Do you intend to press charges? How does it feel to be betrayed by family?" I didn't answer. Dan shielded me with his arm, guiding me through the crowd. "No comment," he barked. "The case is pending." But inside, words swirled in my chest, bitter and sharp. How does it feel? Feels like drowning while the person you raised holds you under. It feels like sewing a coat for decades, only to watch someone set it on fire for warmth that lasts an hour. That evening, I returned to my condo, my safe haven, now legally shielded. I sat at the table with pen and paper, the silence heavy around me. The decision came with no hesitation. I rewrote my will. Every clause that once left anything to Mark or Brooke was struck out. Their names, once written in hope, were erased in steel. In their place, I designated a protective trust for my grandchildren, funds that could be accessed only when they were of age, shielded from their parents' hands. My condo, the last fortress, was placed into that trust as well. I thought of David, of the promise I'd whispered at his grave years ago. "I'll protect what we built." Tonight I felt I had finally kept it. At work the next morning, my coworkers surprised me. A simple mug sat on my station, wrapped in tissue paper. Across it, bold letters spelled, "Not your guarantor." Laughter bubbled around me, gentle, supportive. "We saw the news," one of the girls said softly. "We're proud of you, Helen." For the first time in weeks I smiled. Not the forced, brittle smile I wore at Brooks' brunches, but a real one. But the family chat was another story. My phone buzzed relentlessly throughout the day. Message after message lighting up the screen. "Mom, please don't do this. Think of the kids. Helen, you're making a mistake. Drop the case for the family's sake. Do you really want your grandchildren to see their father in prison?" I muted the chat. The silence that followed was sweeter than music. Days turned into weeks. News spread that Lucas's brokerage office was shuttered with a sign taped to the glass. "Under audit." His license, pending investigation, hung by a thread. Brooks' cousin avoided eye contact whenever our paths crossed at community events. Even Brooks' parents distanced themselves, no longer defending their daughter with the same vigor. Mark was unraveling. Friends told me he was under investigation for fraud, facing both civil liability and potential criminal charges for elder abuse. His text messages shifted in tone. At first, defensive. "You're blowing this out of proportion. We would have paid it back. You just had to trust us." Then desperate. "Please, Mom, don't let them put me in jail. I'm your son. I swear we can fix this. Just drop the charges." And finally, almost pitiful, "I thought we'd fix it later." I stared at that last message for a long time. Later. That was always his word. Later, he'd get his finances in order. Later, he'd pay me back. Later, he'd appreciate what I'd done. Later, he'd finally see me not as a tool but as a mother. But later never came. I typed my reply carefully, each word chosen like a blade. Not later, never. "I'm not your wallet anymore." I pressed send. The silence that followed was deeper than any courtroom, heavier than any injunction. I brewed myself tea, the steam rising gently in the quiet. Then I tucked away a copy of the clause that had nearly cost me everything. Guarantor irrevocably consents, waiving right to prior notice. At the bottom, in my own hand, I wrote, "Any decision tied to my name or my home, signed only by me in person with witnesses." I folded the paper, placed it in my desk drawer, and closed it firmly. If there was ever another housewarming in my life, it would be mine. Without balloons, without champagne, without guests snapping photos for show. Just a door that opened only to those I chose, and never again to forged formalities. A month later, the Ridgewood estate sat on the market with a mocking label slapped across its glossy listing. On hold, title dispute. The grand house, once the glittering symbol of Brooke's triumph, now stood empty, its balloons long deflated, its lawn unkempt, the dream rotting on its marble floors. Lucas's brokerage office displayed a different sign. Under audit. The blinds were drawn, the door locked, and his name now whispered in conversations as a cautionary tale. Too greedy, people said. Didn't think anyone would catch him. And Mark, my son, was now a headline in the local paper. Man faces fraud charges in elder abuse case. His mugsh *T looked nothing like the boy I remembered. His eyes, once wide and hopeful, were dull with panic. His mouth twisted into a grimace of denial. Reporters used words like exploitation and forgery, words that clung to him like tar. But still he texted me. Long paragraphs, rambling, veering between apology and accusation. Mom, forgive me. I thought we'd fix it later. I only wanted the best for the kids. Then in the same breath. You've ruined everything. You made me look like a criminal. You'll regret this. I read them in silence, then deleted them. My final reply had already been given. Not later, never. I'm not your wallet anymore. Since then, the silence had been liberating. I began to live like the person I had denied myself to be for decades. My condo, once a cage of anxiety, became my fortress again. I brewed tea each morning, not as fuel for another day of sacrifice, but as a ritual of ownership. The steam curling from the cup felt like freedom. I sorted through my closets, shedding years of servitude in the form of receipts, loan statements, birthday cards scrawled with thanks, Mom instead of love. I donated furniture I had bought for Mark when his own apartment was bare. I sold jewelry I had once considered Brooke's inheritance. Each item leaving my home felt like poison drained from a wound. I visited the bank on my own terms. The clerk, the same cheerful Ellie who had congratulated me on a loan I never sought, now looked at me with new respect. Your file is fully secure, Mrs. Carter. No activity can occur without your physical presence. She smiled sheepishly, as if apologizing for the blind cheer of her earlier mistake. At work, my hours remained cut, but the bakery no longer felt like drudgery. I moved slower, yes, but I moved freely. My co-workers treated me with quiet admiration. They had seen my story splashed across headlines. They had watched me walk into hell and drag myself back out with my name intact. One afternoon, they gathered around me with a gift. A small notebook embossed with the words "For you." Inside, each co-worker had written something. You inspire us. You're proof it's never too late to fight back. We're proud to work beside you. I cried. Not because of sorrow, but because for the first time in years I felt seen, not as a provider, not as a guarantor, not as a wallet with wrinkles, but as Helen. The family chat remained muted. A graveyard of unanswered pleas. Brooke had tried her hand at manipulation again. Helen, you're tearing the family apart. The kids will suffer without you. I didn't respond. For years I had believed that love meant sacrifice. That motherhood meant erasure. That the measure of my worth was in dollars given, hours surrendered, dreams postponed. But now, in the silence of my condo, I finally saw the truth. Love that must be bought isn't love. It's debt. And debt, like fraud, devours everything until nothing remains. I rewrote my routines. On Sundays, instead of driving to their house with pies, I walked in the park alone. The air was cleaner without their voices echoing in my head. Children laughed on swings, strangers smiled as they passed, and none of them asked me to co-sign their futures. On weekdays after my shifts, I sat by David's grave with fresh flowers. I learned too late, I whispered to him. But I learned. The wind in the trees felt like his approval, his quiet strength wrapping around me. At night, I opened the drawer where I kept the paper Dan had given me, the damning last line. Guarantor irrevocably consents to foreclosure and sale. Beneath it, my own handwriting glared back. Any decision tied to my name or my home, signed only by me in person with witnesses. It wasn't just a note. It was a vow. The months passed. Ridgewood crumbled into scandal. Mark and Brooke's friends drifted away, unwilling to be associated with their shame. Brooke's parents, once smug with pride, now kept their distance. muttering excuses at community events. Even my grandchildren, caught in the crossfire, seemed like ghosts. I missed them, yes, but I knew. Better they see me as distant than see me as a fool. The betrayal had cut deep. But the wound had become scar tissue, strong and unyielding. One evening I brewed tea and sat on my balcony as the sun set behind the city skyline. The air smelled faintly of rain. I thought about everything that had been taken from me, and everything I had taken back. My home. My will. My dignity. For so long I had been defined by what I gave away. Now I was defined by what I kept. The irony was sharp enough to taste. They had tried to erase me with forged ink, but in doing so they had written my freedom. I sipped my tea, the bitterness warming my tongue, and asked the night the question that had lodged itself in my chest ever since. What is the cost of betrayal? It isn't the money. It isn't the home. It isn't even the humiliation of paper plates and forged signatures. It's the death of illusion. The moment you realize the people you loved most were never really yours. And once that illusion dies, there's no resurrection. Only clarity. Only solitude. Only freedom. I sat there until the sky turned black, the city lights flickering on one by one. Alone. But not broken. Because I had finally learned the hardest truth of all. It is better to stand alone in truth than to be surrounded by family built on lies. And I would never be useful only by signature again.